I have told you this many, many times. Do you remember the Kyoto Protocol? Now, back in the day, because we had the Paris Climate Agreement, right? But back in the day, the Kyoto Protocol was the big climate agreement between the nations, and Bill Clinton got us involved in all of that. And eventually what it was, we didn't sign it, right? So we didn't go into the Kyoto Protocol. And the United States had reduced its emissions more so than any of the countries in the Kyoto Protocol did. So we weren't a part of the environmental agreement, and yet we did better in environmental performance than any of those other countries. And we ended up finding out that the Kyoto Protocol was a giant carbon credit scheme, and countries were buying carbon credits to offset their lack of enthusiasm for reducing their own emissions. So like Germany, for instance, I think was buying carbon credits from these third world countries, and it became a whole big racket where these countries would sell their allotment of carbon emissions to other countries, and then those countries would basically not reduce their carbon emissions. Carbon credits are just a giant scam, okay? It's a scam that made Al Gore even more rich than he really is, than he used to be, I should say, but it's a giant scam. If you don't know what a carbon credit is, all right, I have, let's just say, I have my emissions set for the month, okay? So whatever the parts per million or whatever it is, like 10,000. Okay, so I have 10,000 emissions, whatevers that I can go ahead and do every single month. And if I want to reduce that, I've got to change my lifestyle. Like maybe I don't drive an SUV, I get a hybrid car. Okay, then that basically what that means is that I'm not putting out 10,000 a month in emissions. I'm actually doing 8,000. But I don't really like a hybrid car, and I really like my SUV. So I don't want to reduce my lifestyle in any way, shape, or form. I don't want to actually help the planet. So what I will do is I'll hop onto the internet and I'll go to a website. And what this website does is they sell carbon credits. And I will buy a carbon credit, okay, or several of them. And what that does is it reduces my emissions by how many carbon credits I purchase. So if I purchase 2,000 carbon credits, instead of swapping out my SUV for the hybrid car to get down to 8,000 emissions, instead of 10,000, I just buy 2,000 carbon credits. And now I am at 8,000 emissions produced, Tim. I've changed absolutely nothing. I've changed nothing about my life, and yet I am contributing less greenhouse gases to the planet. Now, for the many of you out there, you're wondering, well, how is this achieved? Well, the company that sells you the carbon credits super promises that they are going to plant trees and invest in green technology. Pinky swear. What we found is that most of those companies just pocket the money and don't do diddly squat. That's what we've ended up finding. And that many of them are, in fact, international criminal scam. But it made the person who bought the credits feel like they were doing something good for the environment and the planet and their children without actually having to do it. All they had to do was spend some ducats and they were good to go. Well, the United States, once again, according to the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, their latest monthly energy report, U.S. carbon dioxide emissions are at their lowest point since 1992. Producer Tim. Man, President Trump making carbon emissions great again. I know some of you are going to go, no, it's the emission standards that Obama had. I get it. Per capita carbon emissions are the lowest that they have been since 1950. Per capita. Now, for those of you who don't recall, before Obama is when the Kyoto Protocol happened. And when we reduced our emissions without being a signatory of the Kyoto Protocol, much better than the other nations, we had done that not because of government compulsion, but because, well, that's where the free market was trending. People wanted some of the technology that was being developed. There was also scientific advancements that allowed some of this technology to be done at a feasible consumer rate. And so as long as we have that consumer-driven market economy, companies will continue to develop stuff that we want to buy. And as long as we want to buy it, they will continue to develop. The moment we don't want to buy it, that's when government compulsion has to stick in. Right now, they're trying to get you to buy silver, okay? So what they're doing is they're trying to tell you that everywhere you go in the world is going to be solar-powered now. It's not. But they're telling you that. And you can't have solar power without silver because silver is a critical component to solar components. And so therefore you should invest in silver because solar power. Now, again, is silver a wise investment? Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. It all depends on where it is in the market. I'm not telling you never to invest in silver or gold or anything like that. It's just that don't be foolish about it as most people are. But that's how they're trying to sell it to you right now is that everywhere is going to be solar. And so you have to buy silver. Before it was Apple iPhone uses silver in all of their phones. And if Apple, more people have Apple phones than any other phone. So you've got to go out there and buy silver because Apple is going to continue to sell phones. Okay, so they're always doing something to push you to buy these precious metals and things of that nature. So if it's all market driven, that was my whole point, not to attack the silver market, although kind of a little bit because it's a scam. We're also outpacing our allies. Hey, wait, how is it that we're outpacing our allies, Producer Tim? We didn't sign on to Kyoto, and we pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. How do we keep outpacing our allies in emissions? They keep signing all of these environmental agreements, and we keep backing out of them, and yet we continue to outperform them. Ladies and gentlemen, how is this possible? How? Genuinely asking, because free market only explains a small portion of that, because the American consumer right now is not oversold on green products. So how is it that we keep doing better than our more environmentally friendly and conscious allies? That's a great question. Yeah. So we're outpacing our allies, many of whom criticized President Trump's decision to put America first. In the last year alone, U.S. carbon emissions fell more than 0.5%, while European emissions rose 1.5%. Wait a minute. European emissions are going up by 1% more than ours, and they are all a part of these stupid environmental agreements and alliances, and we are not a part of them. That should probably tell you that these agreements don't really do much, right, Producer Tim? Yeah. I mean, think about this. Let's see. It's the height of irony given Europe's virtue signaling last year after President Trump shredded his predecessor's unconstitutional treaty, air quote, treaty. The globalist leaders of France, Germany, and Italy claimed that it cannot be renegotiated, and they referred to the irreversible agreements as a vital instrument for our planet, societies, and economies. And yet we are outperforming and outpacing every single one of them. And we're not a signer of any of those agreements. I wonder why that is. So we didn't sign Kyoto, and we outperformed all of the Kyoto nations, which include all of the same nations, by the way, that have signed on to the climate agreement in Paris. And we pulled out of the Paris Agreement, and we are outperforming all of the nations who are part of the Paris Agreement. Dang, sounds like getting into environmental agreements with Europe seems like President Trump was right, Producer Tim, seems like a scam to throttle American competitiveness, not actually improve anything about the economy or the environment.